Good evening, everyone. So, we're going to go through a little bit of a debrief on the local elections. I've just seen a comment saying, good to see someone not talking about the coronation. No coronation talk here. There's far more important things to be doing. We've now got all of the results. I say all of the results, that's a lie. There is one council still to declare. That's not really going to make any difference. So this is the sort of map we have now. Let's start off with... and I have checked to make sure my microphone's on. Let's start off with having a little look at it. So now what's happened is Labour have more councillors than the Conservatives in the seats that were contested this week. They have more councils than the Conservatives. In terms of how bad this is for Rishi Sunak, if we just put up the headline results. So... consider in 2015 the Conservatives did very well in the local elections. So these local elections that happened this week were the ones that were done in 2019 and then before that in mostly in 2015. And we had so the Conservatives did well in 2015. In 2019 they did very badly under Theresa May. Theresa May lost 44 councils, which was about a third of all the councils the Conservatives had at that point. So that's quite bad. Rishi Sunak has lost 48 councils this week, which is numerically more than May lost, but proportionally way more. She lost about a third of her councils. He's lost 3/5. 3/5. Nearer to 2/3 than a half. Oh, you know, it's well over a half. So that's quite bad in itself. The other thing to note, of course, is that the Conservatives did lose 1,000 seats. Now, the Conservatives were saying, oh, we expect to lose 1,000 seats. No, they weren't. They were just saying that so that when they lost like 600, 700 and 800, however many they actually thought they were going to lose, I don't know how many they thought they were going to lose, way fewer than 1,000. That way they could come out of it going, oh, we did really well. Because Labour did the same thing. Labour said, oh, we'll be really happy with 400 seats, like hell they will. Oh yeah, if we make net gains of 400 seats, that'll be a really good night. So that now that they've got a net gain of 536, they can go, hey, we did even better. Everyone can do that. The Liberal Democrats and the Greens obviously did absolutely stonkingly. They often do. You know, when the party of government is deeply unpopular, the Lib Dems and the Greens always gain. That's just standard. Adam's saying there, we still need to be cautious. If the Tories pick up 1,100 seats in Redcar and Cleveland, Rishi could save face. Oh, is that the one that's still to be done? I haven't actually checked which council's pissing about. Yeah, it's an absolute disaster. There's no way Rishi Sunak can put lipstick on this pig. You know, for all they're distracting us all with the coronation. This is an absolute disaster because you've got to bear in mind this election. It's not like the Conservatives did really well in 2019. Like, let's say the Conservatives done really well in 2019. Okay, now you would expect to pay for it in terms of losses. But they did really badly. It was their second worst performance in 2019. And Rishi Sunak has somehow made it worse. and a lot worse. You know, the fact that they lost over 1,000 seats, the fact that they've lost over half of their councils after the carnage of 2019. Rishi Sunak cannot claim to be the man with the plan. It's completely gone. Ironically, you could argue, so Rishi Sunak, I've said ever since he became Prime Minister, has struggled for authority in his party, and he still doesn't have control, but there's a sort of uneasy alliance. And you could argue that really came with the Windsor framework. Well, Windsor, that most Tory of places, is now a Liberal Democrat council. Oh, it's right. Let's get some comments before we pick up on some more things. M saying, "Are you not talking about the King Good? It's all far too pompous. Could do without it." Yes, we can. So we're not going to. What does the big picture look now going forward? So First of all, I have done a video, if anyone hasn't seen it yet, 5 p.m. today, so one of the things that's coming out in the media is there's a so-called a forecast, what they call a projected national share, saying that, oh, Labour won't win a majority. Crap. I did a video at 5 p.m. explaining how that's a load of crap. Even the statistician who came up with the figure knows it's rubbish. But this is the big picture, but let's actually look at the smaller picture, because there was a lot of incredibly interesting things happen. So the first one, I mentioned this in a video yesterday, but I want to look at Bracknell Forest. In last week's video, when I was saying what we should watch out, so obviously we did a stream last week when I said we should watch out for this, that and the other. Well, let's go and watch them. So one thing I said on the Progressive Alliance front, now we're not going to get a formal or even informal Progressive Alliance in the general election, but on the Progressive Alliance front, Bracknell Forest, Berkshire, Tory as they come. Tory as they come. In fact, I'll tell you how Tory it was. Until a few days ago, Bracknell Forest not only had a Tory council, but 37 of the 41 councillors were Conservative. So in the council room there, the council meetings, 37 Conservative councillors, 4 Labour councillors, and that's it. No independents, no Lib Dems, nothing. Now, there's 22 Labour councillors, 7 Lib Dem councillors, 2 Green councillors. And the reason why I say watch out for this one was because there was talk of an unofficial Progressive Alliance. So if you looked at the candidates in 12 out of the 15 wards, if you consider the Progressive Alliance to be Labour, Lib Dems and Greens, there was only one of those parties represented in 12 of the 15 wards. So yes, there's always an extent to which parties will say, well, we've no chance in this ward, so we've no point even contesting it. But usually there's a paper candidate. They put someone in. Like my ward, for example, which is called Central Axome, there wasn't even any campaigning here. I didn't get a single leaflet through my door. Not a Conservative leaflet, not a Labour leaflet. The only candidates that stood were 2 Conservatives and 2 Labour candidates. None of them campaigned. The Labour candidates, my partner knows them, they were just paper candidates. They've no desire to become councillors, and the Conservatives won it. But that is what you do. You still usually put up paper candidates. You don't always, but usually do. For here, for there not to be paper candidates in 12 of the 15 wards, and no one believes that's a coincidence. So this was clearly a Progressive Alliance, unofficially, of course, and it has reaped the benefits. And I want to point something else out that's really interesting here. So the graphic on the right shows the history of the, obviously, councils come and go. This one's only been around since the early 70s. But notice that it was Labour. And then when did it flip to the... So it was Labour in 73 when there was a Conservative government. Then it flipped Conservative in 76. Oh, well, Labour had got in then. So it was Labour just before Labour won the national general election. Then it stayed Conservative until 1995. Then it went Labour again. And then it flipped back in 97. What happened in 97? Labour came to power. Now it's flipped, and it's been Conservative all that time. Now it's flipped Labour again. So this is the herald of Labour governments, this place. Anyway, catch up with a few more comments before we move on. Oh, there's a lot of them, sorry. Let's have a look. Should be happy at the near 1,000 seat loss. It's more than 1,000. In fact, it's a net... It's in excess of a net total of 1,000. Remember, the Conservatives gained, so the actual amount of seats they lost is well over 1,000, because they did gain some. They even gained some councils. So the actual number of losses is well over 1,000. It's just the net loss is like 1,060-ish. But BBC, Channel 4, Guardian, SNP tell me Labour won't win outright majority. Who do I believe you are then? Curtis saw my video, by the way. Then read his articles. Well, first of all, okay, so let's put this back up. So I used this in my video earlier, but let's put it back up. So this is Curtis's forecast in 2019. So his projected national share had Labour winning 28%. They had a general election that very year, just a few months later, and they got 32.2%. Conservatives, he said 28%, they got 43.6%. Now, you may say with the Conservatives, oh yeah, but they changed leader and stuff like that. Yeah, the Labour didn't. And also, Labour ran a very bad campaign. So Labour had the same leader. That leader was even less popular by the end of the year. Labour ran a very bad campaign, and yet they still got 15% more proportionally than was forecast by Curtis. And that's because Curtis knows it's a load of crap. Every year he writes an article saying how it's a load of shit, because he says it works on the principle that voting behaviour in local elections is the same as general elections, which it isn't. It works on the principle of using previous local and general election results, but they're completely out of kilter, because I don't even think you can sensibly do that at any time, but British politics has been in such flux over the last few years that it's impossible to do that, because the issues that are important to vote. So the issues that people were voting for in last year's because that PNS for this year also uses results from last year and the year before and the year before and the general election in 2019. And it's completely different people in charge of the party, completely different policies. The public have a different attitude to different policies. Brexit was a key anchor for those incorrect predictions. And now everyone's got a very different view of Brexit. So the PNS is complete crap. And the other thing is, as people in Labour are pointing out, I didn't mention it in the video because it wasn't really necessary, because I could go on for an hour, is that projected national share will use the local elections from the last time Scotland had local elections, where the SNP was still going strong. The SNP are not going, even if Humza Yousaf somehow turns it around, they're not going to be going as strong now. This is actually, not only have they got a less effective leader, even if he somehow settles the bout, but the damage that's now been done is the whole thing is a nonsense. No matter how you look at it, it's a nonsense. It's provably a nonsense because the last time there was a PNS done just before an election, it got it very wrong. The theory behind it's all wrong. As I said in the video, what Curtis has been asked to do is come up with some way of using the local elections to predict the general election result. And he's gone, well, I'll do my best. And he's done the best he can do, but it's not a possible thing to do. Like me using the last general election to see how it changes if you apply PR. Yeah, well, this is even more ridiculous. But yeah, you're right, because having PR would also change people's voting behaviour. Like, at the moment, you are going to get you always get some tactical voting in general elections, but you're going to get a lot. When people sense that it's time to boot the party of government out, you get more tactical voting, particularly when it's time to boot the Conservatives out. But you don't need to with PR, or not nearly as much. I keep saying Starmer's leadership pledges were not pledges, but he's on record on the Andrew Neil Show confirming they were pledges. They were positions where he stood. They were intentions. Like, it's true that Starmer's not trying to say, oh no, I didn't say they were pledges at all. What I am trying to say to you is, when you read them, they weren't. They were. He stated quite clearly what they were. They were They were where he stands. They were his ideal policies. But it doesn't matter anyway. The promises that matter, as I keep saying, are the promises to the public, and the promises to the public are in the manifesto. Manifesto's not out yet. Those are the only one that matters, because anyone who's a member of Labour who is not going to automatically vote Labour ought not to be in Labour, you know. But anyway, evening. Am I feeling happy? I'm feeling quite content, yes. I'm feeling quite happy. So let's have a look at a few individual ones. So we'd had a look at Bracknell Forest. The Kent ones were another really interesting one. Kent, as a county, is basically stop the boats, isn't it? It's stop the boats county. This is where the boats are coming. They're going to Kent. You know, the small boats are going to Kent. So initially the influx is there if there is a really large influx. And the Conservatives are pumping their stop the boats narrative. It's where Nigel Farage lives and foghorns. And yet, look at, I mean, all of Kent, I mean, before I go to this, if I go back to the map, people need to know where Kent is now, don't they? So Kent's round here now. You can see there's no Tory councils in Kent. They're all gone. They're gone. They're either Labour or no overall control. So the Conservatives have been losing everywhere. But, where have I lost it? Nah. Oh, there it is. Let's get rid of the map again. There it is. So if you look here, so Dover, Medway was the big one because Medway was a crucial target for Labour. Labour were actively going after Medway. And this is the one that where we got it announced fairly quickly. Labour gained control from the Conservatives as well. They gained 11 council seats. Conservatives lost 13. That, again, that is one where Nigel Farage plies his trade. But Dover was already a huge one. Again, Labour gained control from the Conservatives there. And if the Stop the Boats campaign was going to work, these are the places it would work best. If they're not going to work here, where are you? Do I have one where the Greens won? Yeah, hold on, let me check. So the council that the Greens won was Mid Suffolk. Unfortunately, the Greens did actually. They must have gained somewhere else. I'm not sure where else they gained because I know they wanted Brighton because Brighton is where they have their MP Caroline Lucas, but Labour actually took that one. As an interesting one. You're still crossing fingers for a Lib Lab coalition. There won't be a Lib Lab coalition, and it's not nothing to do with people not wanting to do a deal. The Liberal Democrats will not win enough seats. Think about it this way. If the Liberal Democrats even trebled their seats at the next election, which is at the upper end of ambition, that is not enough to form a coalition realistically. Because Labour, in order to govern, unlike the Conservatives, the Conservatives can sort of govern with a bare majority. Bear in mind, the Conservatives, until it came to the sharp end of the Brexit deal, the Conservatives were governing after 2017 with just DUP supplying confidence. And Labour can't. The Labour rebels, they'll have a good 20 to 30 rebels and they'll be unmanageable. So it's almost like if Labour won a majority of one, they don't need a coalition, but they'd sort of need a coalition to counter the rebels, because the rebels may as well carry on sitting on the opposition benches. But there you go. Did I watch Hans Clown Show interview trying to blame the Tory losses on Putin's Russia? Yes, I did. I mean, he was the chair, so he was responsible for the campaign. The thing is, it was an absolute disaster. The other thing, I mean, I may have mentioned, I checked when the polls were open, I sort of checked how Labour and the Conservatives had promoted themselves. So on Labour's Twitter account, for example, I use Twitter rather than Facebook, they've got stuff there with Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves prominently displayed. You look at the Conservatives' Twitter from the 24 hours before the polls opened, there was like one with Rishi Sunak on it, and he was just there in a crowd. That was it. So they because I was thinking to myself, they haven't really sent out anyone to do any real campaigning. Boris Johnson said he'd been campaigning. No, he hadn't. You know, James Cleverly, we saw what happened when he did. Suella Braverman, I've not seen her doing... I mean, I'm sure she was going out doing a bit of leafleting or something, but I've not really seen anything on the media about her doing it. The only one who seemed to go out was Greg Hans and Rishi Sunak. So it's like they know they don't have the personality. But Greg Hans, all he kept doing was getting out that stupid joke letter. So what did the Conservatives have? That joke letter and stop the boats. That was it. That was it. They didn't want to talk about anything else. So of course they did really badly. I think I saw a comment earlier on before we went live saying, is it anything to do with some ethnicity? It's like, no, it's not. They just had a really bad campaign, because in reality, the Conservatives need, and Rishi Sunak will know this, they need to start adopting sensible policies. And then they, not just in terms of promising them, they have to deliver. Whatever they promise at the next election, people are going to say to them, why didn't you do this over the last 14 years? That is going to be the question. Any party that's been in government for 14 years, why haven't you already done it then if it's such a good idea? See, what should happen, like if you look at where Labour were when they went into the 2010 general election, if they said, right, we're going to do these things, if someone had said to them, why didn't you do this over the last 13 years? They would be able to say, because we were building these other things and now this is the next inevitable step. But the Tories can't do that, because you ask them, what have you built over the previous? At the moment it's 13 years, but come the general election it'll be 14 years. What have you built over the last 14 years? What have you done? What's your project been? They haven't got any. They've got no projects at all. The only things they've done is austerity and Brexit. So there's not, they don't get to claim that anything that they're trying to do now is building on previous work, because there is no previous work. The country under the Tories is still a building site with absolutely no scaffolding even. They need a new fabrication. I'm not sure what that's in reference to, but you know, as we're talking, it just reminds me of fabricants. Should we have a little look at him? His area was up for grabs. The Conservatives lost 11 seats in Michael Fabricant's neck of the woods. Labour gained 7. The Lib Dems gained 6. So this one, I think, will have gone to 47. So they'll have just, this will now be no overall control. But Labour and the Liberal Democrats could form a coalition to control the council. So the Conservatives have lost that one. It's technically no overall control, but you could find it's Labour and the Lib Dems controlling it now. It's always difficult to tell. You'd always look at it and think, well, surely Labour and the Lib Dems will work together. It always depends on what the local parties are like. Looks like the Tories are going to split into 3. Johnson's gang. Johnson hasn't got a gang. He's just got a load of people with a load of money and big mouths. Rees-Mogg and Braverman in another corner. Sunak trying to return the party to the centre. I mean, we'll see. The thing is, they sort of know splitting's no good for them. It's just that I think behind the scenes, in fact, I don't think I know, behind the scenes, there's going to be a lot of argy-bargy. There's a lot of Conservative MPs now who are going to be thinking, my seat's in danger. Again, someone else said in the comments, I didn't pick it up at the time, they're living in East Staffordshire. East Staffordshire's gone Labour. They were saying, but I don't think that's how it's going to go in the general election. You may be right, but I'll tell you what, the MPs there will not be so confident. You know, if you're thinking because remember, a lot of Tory MPs, some Tory MPs are really rich, some Tory MPs, you know, may be older and close to retirement. Anyway, they've been there. If they lose the seat, fine, whatever. But there's plenty of Tory MPs who are otherwise unemployable and they're not rich yet. They want to keep their seats. And even when you lose your local council, it's not a good sign. It is not a good sign at all. What effect, if any, did voter suppression have on the election result? It may have had quite a lot. I know there was one council where, for the sake of 2 votes in one ward, Labour would have gained control of that council. So, you know, Labour have gained, how many councils did they get? 20 something? Labour gained 22 councils, but for the sake of 2 more votes in one ward, I can't remember exactly where, it would have been 23. And then you think to yourself, now it might be that the voter suppression in that ward hit Tory voters more than Labour voters. I don't know. But given that it was designed to hit Labour voters, you would think at least there maybe it did. But whether it affected the results or not, what it's certainly done is disenfranchised a lot of people. There's a lot of people who wanted to vote, were eligible to vote, legally entitled to vote, and weren't allowed to vote. Some people even took their ID that was on the list of IDs and was still not allowed to vote. Can I take down a photo of my fabricant? Yeah, no problem. Who else should we have? Shall we have Jonathan Gullis, Stoke-on-Trent? He's definitely losing his seat. But this has gone Labour again. This has gone, because, well, I say it was no overall control before, bear in mind. But they've gained 14 seats there, so they now retake control of the council. They haven't actually lost, you'll notice there, they haven't actually lost any Conservative councillors. They were from independents, but the independents were probably Conservatives in reality. But there we go. Did any polling station enforce the ID policy? All of them will have done. They didn't mind. I got my ID out, my driving licence. He gave it a look. I could see him frowning. It doesn't look anything like me. I look like a serial killer on my driving licence, and I'm not a serial killer. But he gave it me back. He said, yeah, okay. Because that's what you do, isn't it? You look at, I've done it before, having to check people's photo ID and gone, you just sort of go, it's probably you, I don't know. But some people have handed it over and been told, no, this is not valid, when it was. Or they say, obviously, it's all anecdotal at the moment. We'll just have to see what happens. Do I think there'll be any case of a judicial review after the latest thing? I mean, I'm not a legal expert. What I would suggest is the government have been making a lot of changes to how you bring the government to court now. What would have to happen if, let's say, a group like Good Law Project wanted to do it? As I understand it now, they'd have to have a lot of people. They'd actually have to represent people. So what you'd need is a lot of people who were denied their vote. They'd need to basically get together, and if a solicitor or barrister says, I will take your, as a class action, I will take your case, they'll need those names. So we'll have to see. I'm going to assume there's going to be some sort of campaign to organise that. We'll have to wait for the dust to settle and obviously the coronation to be over. Wait a few days and see what happened there. You say Labour needs to find a 21st century version, as a campaigning machine to back up Starmer going forward. They just don't have them. I mean, they've got some that appeal to certain groups of people. In terms of, like, if you think about people like John Smith was the last one for Labour, really. Tony Blair was good, but John Smith was really good. And you mentioned Nye Bevan there. These were people who are like almost generational. They're very rare. You don't generally get people like that in politics. So you just have to do with what you can. Good Law projects are going for it, crowdfunding right now. Okay, good. But I'm assuming what they'll actually need is not just the funds. They will need the list of names of people who will provide witness statements and ask them to act on their behalf, albeit for free. They look through your passport to see where you've been. It must have been quiet like it was when I went in. I mean, like, there was no one there. There was myself and my partner. We were outnumbered by everyone actually there. But it's just a small place. There'll be a lot of voter apathy. I haven't even seen, I know the results in terms of who won, but I haven't actually seen the votes. So it's not even really worth it. As I say, no one was campaigning in my ward. Why don't I ever rate Hilary Benn as an orator? He's very good in making arguments, but he's not your, like, when I say orator, I mean like a proper blood and thunder one. You know, the ones who shut their critics up and fire up. Not people who already agree with them. Anyone can go and speak to a crowd of people who have gone to hear that person, and they'll cheer and wave their arms around. I mean, firing up people who are just going along, they don't really know who you are or what you're going to talk about or anything like that. That's what I mean, and they're very rare. Annalisa Dodd, spoke to her on Thursday, expect a call. She'll be lucky, she hasn't got my number. Drop my name to her for Labour comms. Well, I mean, I've tried to contact Labour directly, they don't do anything. It just gets lost in the. In fact, someone said the party machine. The Labour Party machine is Peter Mandelson. No, he's not. He's part of the policy group. So are many others. Do Tories have an effective social media machine, or don't they need one? Most of the media anyway. Now, I would say the Tories' social media machine is no better than Labour's. Labour did actually, do you know what? I'll say this. When Jeremy Corbyn first became leader, their comms actually started to look promising. I think a lot of it was down to momentum, in all honesty, rather than the Labour Party. But it was looking promising. It was really taking off. And then it just, and I don't mean it stalled when Corbyn stepped down, it stalled before 2019 even. And I think part of the problem was they just didn't have coherent material to work with. And it's since petered out and it's never really picked up again. But they were looking quite. But the Conservatives, no, they don't. But you are right. They don't need to. They've got the actual media on their side. It's Labour that need it. It's not the Conservatives. But the Conservatives' social media is pretty pants as well, really, when you look at it. Kinnock was good. Kinnock was divisive though, and he said it himself recently. He said himself he was a Marmite figure. That was the problem. He should have won in 1992. Should have won, didn't. And it was because, just people just looked at it. Do we really want that Welsh ginger running the country? And unfortunately, nothing to do with the fact he was ginger or Welsh, I'm sure. But, it's the personality. It was like he fired it's like Angela Rayner. Now, I'm not like drawing the link with gingers there, but Angela Rayner, people will go, oh, she'd be brilliant. It's like, but you agree with her, don't you? That's what she's good at. She's good at firing people up who already agree with her. What you need is people to reach out. I mean, what Labour has had to do, Labour have been in opposition for 13 years now. What they have to do to win next year is they have to reach out to people who've been voting Conservative for 14 years. That's what they need to do. They need to persuade people who've been voting Conservative for 13 at the moment, will be 14 years, that actually it's time to vote Labour again. And these will be the people who did vote Labour before that 14 years. About Stella Creasy or Yvette Cooper, they seem to be genuinely good communicators. They are extremely good at getting their points across. I wouldn't, again, describe them as the big fire and thunder ones, but they're incredible. I mean, anyone who watches Yvette Cooper destroy Suella Braverman or whichever junior minister she dares to throw in front of her will know she's very good at getting a lot of points across quickly, but without firing them out so quickly you can't keep up. She is incredibly good at that. Stella Creasy is very good as well, yes. But I haven't, in all honesty, seen them address a crowd of people who don't really know. See, I'll tell you what would be, do you know what? I'm going to be cheeky here. Do you know what would be a really good test? They won't do it. But what would be a really good test is, see, what you want to test an orator out is get them to go and talk to a crowd that's not there for them. Right? So, I don't know, turning up to maybe a National Rejoin March crowd. Turn up as one of the speakers, because everyone will have gone for the event. They'll have gone for other speakers as well. You'll only have so many of your own. Go there. They should go there, talk to a crowd like that. If they fire that crowd up, then they can say, do you know what, I can do this. If Kinnock had won in 92, the Tories would have had him out in 97 and blamed him for the later economic mess. Tories having to earn their mess after 92 led to the landslide in 97. We don't actually know that. I accept the point that the big economic mess came later in 92, and would Kinnock have been able to do anything to avoid it? Maybe not. But I don't know that it's necessarily certain that that would have been the case. Because apart from anything else, Major did get the economy moving back in the right direction again. So if Kinnock could have got it firing really strongly after that. And the other thing as well, like the way the Conservatives handled it surely is very different to the way Labour would have handled it. A lot of people lost their houses. Now, when the banking crisis hit when Labour were in government, that did not occur. So how do we know that, you know, maybe that was the major factor, that a lot of people were left unsupported, and if the Labour government did not fail them, then there wasn't necessarily any reason why several years later they would have punished Labour for it. So I'm not sure it was at all certain. But it was what it was. You can never really tell. Right, anyway, we haven't finished going through all my graphics. What else are we on to? Someone mentioned Johnny Mercer before. We might as well put him up. Plymouth. Johnny Mercer, of course, one of those where he's not a bad... For a Tory, he's not a bad fella. You wouldn't necessarily be cheering as he lost his seat, other than the fact it's another Tory gone. He may not be either. But this was a target for Labour as well. You know, it's not just that it was one council that Labour happened to gain. It was a target for them, and it will be a target area for the general elections as well. So someone like Johnny Mercer certainly needs to be a bit careful. Just trying to see who else there was. Swindon was another target. Swindon's a big Brexit target. Swindon relied on car manufacturing, big Brexit, big Leave voting town. One of these classic industrial towns, although in this case not a northern one. I usually describe them as northern industrial towns voting Leave, but it's nonetheless one of those industrial towns that voted Leave. This one being in the south in this case, though, and it has now flipped Labour. I mean, you can see there Labour gained 9 councillors, more than doubling their number of councillors. Conservatives lost 10. And it wasn't in Plymouth. It wasn't all of them that were up for election. Remember, it wasn't the whole council. So, but that was a really bad one for them. And then Boris Johnson, the one bit I say Boris Johnson didn't do any campaigning. He did one bit of campaigning on one day where he went out in his car pissed as a fart, and he was in Derbyshire, if you recall from his little clip, saying, "Oh, don't worry, Labour aren't going to do anything in Derbyshire." Well, let's have a look at Derbyshire. There's 4 councils up here. Derby, Labour won that. North East Derbyshire, yeah, Labour won that as well. South Derbyshire, yeah, Labour got that. And then the Derbyshire Dales went to no overall control, I think. Yes, it did, look. The Liberal Democrats having the most council seats there now. So basically, the Conservatives lost Derbyshire. Boris Johnson is one bit of campaigning. I'll go to Derbyshire because that should be easy, because they're not going to lose Derbyshire. And you wonder to yourself, because remember, when we say the Conservatives lost over 1,000, net total of over 1,000, they actually lost way over 1,000. I need to find out who. Who was the Conservative that changed sides early this year? Well, it was quite a while ago. It was Christian Wakeford. If you're going to ask me where he's from now, hang on. I don't know. Wakeford MP. I think it was in the Bury South. So, I mean, that was one that will, of course, be going there. I don't think Bury was up in the elections this time. Let me have a quick look. I don't... Oh, it was. But it was already Labour. But Labour did gain. Conservatives lost 1 councillor. Wasn't really much change, in all honesty. Didn't Middlesbrough have a really shady Tory mayor? Yeah. Yes, so basically Middlesbrough is going to be... Teesside is going to be one of the sites of these Brexit free ports, right? And there's a lot of dodginess going on there. The Labour MP for Middlesbrough has been... reporting in Parliament that there's some very dodgy dealings going on, including giving millions of pounds of public assets to a couple of Tories for like a few quid. And they're denying it. They're saying, oh, this is outrageous, scurrilous. You say that outside of Parliament, we'll sue you. And it's like, okay, The thing is now, there was a Tory mayor, there's now a Labour mayor. So that Labour mayor, if it's all above board, fine. Well, it's not fine because these free ports are shit. But if it is all above board, then, you know, nothing need happen. If it's not, the new mayor of Middlesbrough can open the books on the whole thing. And I strongly suspect they will do. I strongly suspect they will do. The current Middlesbrough mayor was an independent. He may have stood as an independent, but he was a Tory. A lot of independents are Tories. But anyway. But the Labour mayor, the new Labour mayor of Middlesbrough, I strongly suspect is not going to be concealing anything untoward in the details. If the Tories have lost more than they said, how do I think they'll spin it? I'm looking forward to finding out. Because here's the thing. The way they intend, because their plans are all awry now, they're gone, they're finished. They intended to spin it by saying, we expect to lose 1,000 seats. Then when they lost, say, 700, wow, that was good. It's like, no, losing 700 seats is never good. Oh, no, it's brilliant because we thought we'd lose 1,000. That actually, so they would spin that as we've actually gained 300 that the polls said we were going to lose, even though but they've now lost more than that. So they can't spin it. I mean, I'll tell you how bad it is. Rishi Sunak, if you didn't see it, he came out to make a statement yesterday morning saying that it shows that he has to carry on delivering the people's priorities. In other words, do nothing else, do nothing different. In reality, that can't happen. Privately, and that's what they'll say, but that's not spin, that's rubbish. No one suffers a tragic loss like that and say, like, what do politicians do whenever they have a bad result? They say, we need to reflect, like Johnny Mercer did. We need to reflect, we need to listen to people, we need to, like, come back better. That's what you say. That's what a credible politician says. We need to listen to people better. We've not been communicating well enough with voters. You accept the failings, and that's what you say. Rishi Sunak isn't saying that. So he's not even trying to spin it at the moment. But privately, I'll tell you what, behind closed doors, privately, there'll have to be serious discussions because they know that these are not the building blocks of a successful campaign next year. And it doesn't matter what the aim of that campaign is, whether it's to win the election or whether it's even just to reduce Labour's seats so that they cannot govern effectively. Whatever their aim is not served by these local election results. What's the odds of him opening up the books? Well, I don't know them, but I really don't understand why he would not. Even if it's not like publishing them for the public, I can understand why you don't do that. You know, there's certain things you have to keep confidential. But I really see no reason why very quickly this new mayor will not have people go through it all and tell them if there's anything dodgy in it, and if there is, announce it. There's no reason for Labour are not interested in covering up for these Brexit free ports or for Tories nicking public assets. Every Tory's telling the same story. They must have sent a script down. Well, they always do that. They don't pick candidates to think for themselves. If the economy is doing well, as the Tories suggested, why weren't they going to the local elections confident of winning over 1,000 seats? Well, exactly. They lost 1,300 seats in the last elections, the equivalent elections, because Theresa May was presiding over a chaotic Conservative government that was really unpopular. So, indeed, why wasn't he targeting wins? That's exactly what Keir Starmer said. The other thing is the Conservatives will struggle as well, because now I expect, again, the dust is obviously going to settle over the next few days. I expect a few things to start coming up again next week. First of all, Boris Johnson's Partygate inquiry. Second, Rishi Sunak's inquiry. Third, Labour are absolutely going to poke at the Tories over this. They'll be doing it in private in the tea rooms. What do you think your chances are then? How do those results go for you? Go on, give me a positive spin, as well as actually there'll be a few jibes in PMQs and other things, I think, as well. Oxfordshire Lib Dems and the Greens formed a Lib Dem Green alliance. Lib Dems lead the council. Adding Labour have joined together for Oxfordshire's Fair Deal Alliance, which controls the county council. Okay. Did I miss Earwash Borough from the Derbyshire results? Oh, I did, didn't I? Oh, yeah, that's another one the Conservatives lost, isn't it? Yes, I did, sorry. But nonetheless, I mean, I think the point is that Derbyshire, despite what Boris Johnson said, is, in terms of the councils, are not blue. Navarra Media stated Labour's results were underwhelming. You amaze me. Oh, that's astounding. I would never have believed that. Labour unlikely to get a big majority in the general election. Did they say that? That is another astonishing piece of news to me. They also stated any majority would be a big accomplishment. Are they right? No, of course not. They're not Tories. It'd be wrong to call them Tories. But they are people who would rather a Tory government than a Labour government they don't fully approve of. That's where they are. They want a Tory government, because what they want is someone who is exactly like them, in their mould, agrees with them on everything, to be the Labour Prime Minister. That's what they want. They do want a Labour government, but only that specific type. And if they can't get it, they want Labour to lose. And the reason for that is not because they actually prefer a Tory government over a Labour government. It's because if Labour lose, Keir Starmer will have to step down. And then there's another leadership. Basically, their idea of a win is winning a leadership contest for Labour. So they won with Michael Foot, they won with Jeremy Corbyn, so they're hoping for Tory governments for the next 10, 20 years until they can win another Labour leadership contest. That's what they do. They try to undermine Labour. The last thing they want is Labour to form a government, do really well, stay in power for 15 years. Because then the problem is, even when Labour leave power, they should have built up some credible leaders for the future who can then take over. And the chances of them getting someone else in place then are slim. So they need Labour to lose. What's going to be the topic in PMQs this Wednesday? Do you know what? I really don't know. I wonder if Rishi Sunak's investigation could be part of it. Because obviously Labour are still mostly targeting Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak is it's wrong to say he'd be popular, but he is still the most popular asset the Conservatives have. The Conservative Party itself is not popular, and they're not going to regain their popularity. So it's all about the leader. And, Rishi, I suppose he'll have to judge. See, I don't know what are the prospects of Rishi Sunak being in real trouble here. So Keir Starmer will probably have advisors who can give him a better idea of just how much trouble is Sunak in. If it's not that much, maybe it's not worth, he might mention it, but maybe it's not worth going hard on it. Obviously, Starmer went hard on on Partygate with Johnson because he was in real trouble over that. Can't wait to see the next column from Owen Jones given these results. Don't see him falling behind Starmer in the short term. He'll never fall behind him, ever. His ego's too big. If Labour got 35%, but in 95 got 50% before the Blair landslide, does that suggest a tiny majority of hung balanced power? No. Not at all. The local elections don't tell you anything about the vote share in a general election. It can't do on any level. There's not even an indication. It doesn't even give you something with large error bars. The way people vote in a local election is completely different to the way people vote in a general election. What it shows... Oh, hang on. Nearly did a bad thing. What it shows is in areas where people abandoned Labour before, when they now swing back to Labour, it shows that voters there now prefer Labour over the Conservatives, for whatever reason. So it's indicative of that, but it tells you nothing about vote share. You cannot possibly read vote share into it at all, because how would you do it? It's different voters, because you've got less than half the voters voting in local elections as vote in a general election. And it's not the same type. It's not even like it's the same types of voters. There's the voters who vote in local and general elections are very different to the people who vote just in a general election. So you're not taking account of that completely different type of voter. And then the behaviour is different, because in a local election, people might actually vote on local issues. In a general election, a small number might vote for the candidate that thinks they will do better for the local, but they know full well that even a hard-working MP can only do so much for your area from an opposition bench. So they're really thinking about the government with their vote. There's so many reasons why you just on no level can tie it to that. All you can do is say these areas which have been Conservative for a long time have now flipped to Labour. That is a sign of a change of government coming. Like I say, I mean, this Bracknell Forest is an extreme example, but literally flips Labour. Labour win the general election, goes back to Conservative. It's really a Conservative area, it's Berkshire, right? Flips back to Labour just when people are the most pissed off at the Conservatives. Labour win the election. Flips back to the Conservatives. Goes to Labour. Same thing. Yvette Cooper would be your main pick for replacement for Starmer. Chris Bryant a close second. Chris Bryant wouldn't necessarily... He doesn't have ministerial experience, and he hasn't wanted it. That suggests he wouldn't even want to be leader. Again, it's really dodgy picking a backbencher to be leader, because they don't have the proven organisational skills. How bad was the thing I nearly did? I nearly closed down my streaming software. But there we go. As someone who generally quite closely aligned with NM and OJ, politically speaking, their lack of dogmatism pisses me off. They've got a lot of dogmatism going on there. Again, politically, when you talk about political ideas, so here's the thing, right? If you put me in a room with a load of die-hard Corbynistas, and if we just talked about policies, do you know what? We'd agree on so much. As long as, I keep saying, as long as we don't talk about foreign affairs, we would agree on almost everything. But that's not enough, because the country don't. We don't agree. I am very much further to the left than most voters. So you cannot put, if you ask me to put together a manifesto of things that I think would be good policies, it will lose, because most voters don't agree with me. The trick is, if you want to do something, try and persuade people. Persuade people. And until you persuade people to think more like you, then you're going to need to recognise that the ideal manifesto is not one that you 100% agree with. It's the one that wins the election and will make things better. That's what a good government does, makes things better than they were. Any idea about the SNP meltdown and political consequences in Scotland mainly benefit Labour? Again, I said from the start, I refuse to be drawn too much into that until a good half a year has passed. I want to see... ideally, what I'd like to see is some sort of conclusion to the criminal investigation. I would also like to see Yusuf be given time to see if he can settle things down. If the SNP by autumn, say, look like they're turning it back around, then okay, we'll see where it goes. I still think that they are going to have net losses. Labour were already, before Sturgeon resigned, looking at making a lot of gains. Well, I say a lot of gains. Given that they've got one seat in Scotland right now, a lot of gains. Now they could almost double their gains. I don't expect them to suddenly go back to where they were, but I would expect them to win a lot more seats. And if the SNP go into complete meltdown and Kate Forbes splits the party, we've had reports, I don't know how credible they are, that she's planning on introducing a sort of almost like a shadow cabinet of her own within the SNP to challenge Yusuf. I mean, if that happens, if they decide to engage in infighting next year, then, the SNP are just going to collapse, aren't they? You mean lack of pragmatism? Yes. Yeah, they're not at all pragmatic. And they don't need to be. They make plenty of money from their position. They've got plenty of people following them. They make loads of money. And the thing for them is, see, I keep saying that I think to myself, what am I, how's my channel going to go when Labour are in power? They don't have to worry about that because they're pissed off at everyone. When the Conservatives are in power, they're pissed off. When Labour are in power, they're pissed off. They're just pissed off permanently. Their content doesn't change one iota. They're what they say, how they'll say it, what they're reporting on doesn't change. So they have an easy life. They're good. They're made for life. Admittedly, you might think they'll lose a little bit more support if Labour in power and doing really well, because then like saying, well, you're criticising them for this, but they've actually made things loads better. Well, okay, but they'll still have plenty, don't you worry, because their line will be, but they could do so much better still. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. Nothing. Whether things are true in politics never matters. How much do I disagree with the Green Party's policies? Well, at the moment, I disagree with the Green Party accepting a load of racists that were kicked out of Labour. That's one policy I think they ought to sort out. Bear in mind as well, it's very difficult to know between elections what really are the Green Party's policies, because they only have one MP, but nonetheless they do have control or part control of a few councils. And when you look at what they do sometimes in those local councils, they sometimes engage in a bit of NIMBYism as well. But you could get that with Labour councils, so I don't judge on that. But in terms of their policies, it's like they don't have any policies at the moment, so I need to see their next manifesto. But ultimately, the main policies I disagree with it on the Green Party is they have no plan for forming a government. Repost your question Wednesday. Yeah, sorry, and it happens all the time, doesn't it? Build tidal powered death lasers on Dover coast and cancel the Navy. Well, often we need the Navy to go to other places. Not so much we don't really need the Navy that much to patrol our own waters. It needs to be a bit. Mostly it's to go somewhere else and patrol other people's waters. For example, patrolling waters to make sure that Iran doesn't nick more of our, shipping. I don't think it's fair to say the Green Party are Green Tories at all. The Green Party are broadly left-wing, in fact. Again, I keep saying this. There's a fundamental difference. There are no Green Tories, Red Tories. There are only Blue Tories. The Tory party is fundamentally different to any other mainstream party. Obviously, they're not very different to Reform UK. But, the Green Party, Labour, the Liberal Democrats, the SNP, Plaid, they all disagree with each other on some things. But as I keep saying, the one thing they're all doing is they are all wanting to govern for what they believe is the best interests of people. I don't doubt that of any of those parties. The Tory parties are fundamentally different in that they do not want to govern in the best interests of everyone. They're a completely different beast. Completely different. But anyway, I might have even gone over all my slides as well. That's even better because we have sort of run out of time. Go through the last few here again. Say Greens in England are left, but different party in Scotland. It is a different party in Scotland. The Scottish Greens sort of broke away a bit, yes. But I still fundamentally believe that they are governing what they believe is people's best interests. The Conservatives don't. They consciously do not. At best, when I talk about some decent Tories like Johnny Mercer Those sort of Tories believe that they are governing in the best interests of some people. That's the best sort of Tory. The ones that want to do the best for certain types of people, as long as you fit a mould. As long as you fit a mould. And that mould will be people who likes a good church fete, who likes a good coronation, gets the bunting out whenever there's any opportunity to do so. Those sort of people. And that is the best sort of Tory. Whereas everyone else in any other mainstream party actually wants to govern in the best interests of everyone, with the possible, and it's only possible exception of the ultra wealthy, like, and I mean ultra wealthy, I mean billionaires. But there we go. So there we go. It's been a very interesting local election. It's been a very good one. It has obviously been, if we give them the scorecards just to finish off, Labour did well. When they were saying gaining 400 seats, if I put it back up actually, gaining 400 seats, that wouldn't have been great. That would have been okay. It would have been acceptable, but not great. I did say 500 to 600 would be good. 700 would be excellent. So they got 536 net. Okay, that's good. They can be happy with that. They can genuinely be happy with that, not just make a show of it. They can actually be happy with that. The Conservatives losing over 1,000, it's just catastrophic. There's no, put it this way, there's no two ways about it. In fact, I'll point one last thing out. Keir Starmer was getting ready for a reshuffle after these local election results, right? I gather from a report in The Guardian that Labour now think that they don't have to rush with that because they're going to have one last reshuffle before the general election. One last chance to get the biggest, heaviest hitters into the top team ready for the election, the best campaigners, right? This article in The Guardian suggested that there's now no rush for that. So we may not expect to see that reshuffle this side of summer. So that, Labour are certainly genuinely, if that is true, very happy with it, because what it means is Labour have changed their plans because the results were more positive than they expected. The Conservatives are also going to have to change their plans, even if publicly they won't admit it, because this is a catastrophe. A party leadership that does nothing different as a result of this deserves to lose. I mean, they deserve to lose for various reasons, but just taking the party out of it, any party leadership that looks at that and says, yeah, we don't need to do anything different, they deserve to lose. The Lib Dems and the Greens did stonkingly well. Given that the Lib Dems and Greens also did stonkingly well in 2019, this is superb results for them. Absolutely superb. If you're a Lib Dem or Green candidate, it's a shame that you'll probably lose them in 4 years' time. Well, not all of them, of course, but you will make losses in 4 years' time because the Tory areas will flip back Tory because they will no longer be in government and they'll be moaning at Labour then. But there we go. But those are my thoughts on that. We'll be back on next week talking about whatever the issues of the day are next Saturday. Have a good evening, everyone. And until next time, I'll see you later.